It has been a week since the village of Dharali in the North Indian state of Uttarakhand was wiped out in a flash flood. Over 100 people remain missing. The search and rescue operation is in full swing. Roads have been heavily damaged up to 100 kilometers away from the site. The only way to reach the village is through these helicopters. Families are pouring in here in search of their missing relatives.
My brother was inside the hotel. People are saying that he got buried 50 feet below the debris and is no more. I have hope that he might be there in some hospital alive.
For 5 days, I've been coming here to know the whereabouts of my mother and sister. Authorities just ask us to wait.
At the height of tourist season, heavy torrential rains triggered flash floods that swallowed an entire village of 500 people within minutes. Officials confirm 4 deaths, but locals fear many more. Those rescued have been admitted to a local hospital, many with injuries from falling debris. Sohan Singh, who worked at a hotel there that is now buried in mud, saw it happen.
The hotels behind me completely collapsed, and after that, some boys came running from there, whistling and shouting for everyone to run. There was thick fog behind us. We couldn't see anything, and we had no idea what to do or where to run. According to me, more than 50 to 60 people died.
Environmentalists say in recent years, the Himalayan ecosystem faces extreme weather due to climate change and unchecked development.
With flames on their doorsteps, the Spanish Civil Guard rushed to evacuate residents north of Madrid. For one man, though, it was too late. The 50-year-old was airlifted to hospital but died after suffering serious burns.
I want to convey all the sympathy, all the solidarity of the government of Spain to their loved ones. At this moment, the fire remains active, and the day's weather forecast concerns us.
It's one of dozens of blazes active across Spain, causing damage to homes and forcing thousands to flee. Neighbouring Portugal is also dealing with several fire outbreaks. The most serious is burning in the country's northeast, with some 700 firefighters deployed. In northeastern Montenegro, where temperatures exceeded 40 degrees Celsius, a wildfire burned for a second day. Some residents returned to homes ravaged by flames.
The hardest thing for me is the emotional aspect. Everything that can be bought can be compensated, but the memories that burned in these 4 rooms and in the large attic of our house cannot be compensated.
It was a similar story in Turkey, where a blaze continued to rage after sparking in the northwestern province of Çanakkale on Monday.
It is terrible. We've never seen anything like this. Houses, vehicles, everything burned down.
The wildfires come as Europe experiences hotter and drier summers. Figures from the EU's Copernicus Climate Change Monitor showed drought levels were the highest on record for the month of July since data collection began in 2012.
This morning, Chattanooga, Tennessee, drying out after flash floods inundated the city overnight. This big rig driving on Interstate 24 after the road quickly turned into a river. Another car floating in the water. Teams making water rescues, rushing residents to safety. This area getting more than 6 inches in just 4 hours. While the flood threat recedes in Tennessee, it's ramping up thousands of miles to the north. Residents in Juneau, Alaska, told to evacuate, with water from a nearby glacier threatening to overrun its basin. The so-called suicide basin has flooded Juneau before, washing this house away 2 years ago. Now the Army Corps of Engineers helping the town prepare for a possibly record-setting flood. Flooding fears even as the heat is the problem further south, with a coast-to-coast summer scorcher.
It's just been getting hotter and hotter every year.
Record-breaking temperatures bringing heat from the west coast all the way to New England. Temps soared to a record 100 degrees in Brownsville, Texas. 16 million Americans still under heat alerts today.
I like to keep a lot of ice water on hand and also just helping each other out.
Parts of Vermont issuing a burn ban, warning folks it's too hot and too dangerous for a campsite fire.
Any one of those little embers floats away and it can trigger a much bigger fire.
that fire danger is clear out west. Wildfires raging in multiple states. Firefighters battling flames in Colorado, where a fire in Rio Blanco County has grown to the 5th largest in the state's history.
It's a pretty challenging environment, and it wants to move.
Wildfires fanned by a heat wave and strong winds continued to rage across southern Europe on Wednesday, as houses, farms and factories were burned and thousands of residents and tourists were evacuated. A wildfire near the city of Patras in western Greece prompted the evacuation of at least 25 settlements, with the fire setting alight a cement factory and sweeping through olive groves and forests. On the Greek islands of Chios in the east and Kefalonia in the west, both popular with tourists, authorities told people to move to safety as fires spread. In Spain, a volunteer firefighter died from severe burns fighting fire in the central Castile and Leon region. Firefighters hosed down blazing houses and warehouses in villages, where more than 5,000 people were evacuated. The country's state weather agency warned almost all of the country was at extreme or very high risk of fire. Spain's environment minister said many fires were suspected to be intentionally caused, but added it was too early to say how many. In Albania, several major wildfires are burning across the country. In the southern city of Delvina, evacuees returned to their homes, but authorities remained vigilant. Attempts to douse the fires have been hampered by a heat wave across large parts of the continent. Spain was in its 10th day of soaring heat that peaked on Tuesday, with temperatures as high as 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Conditions are expected to last till Monday, making it one of the longest on record.
Having evacuated their homes, these residents of Chandrecha de Queixa in northwestern Spain could only watch on, helpless, as flames engulfed the hills surrounding the village.
What are we going to do if our house burns? There are a lot of animals up there that will also get burned, and no one could find them.
People have already left the village. There's just a few of us here waiting for a bulldozer and firefighters.
The fire broke out on Friday and has since destroyed about 3,500 hectares, according to authorities. Officials have also noted the elevated area is difficult for firefighters to access, further complicating their efforts. More than a dozen wildfires are burning across the country, which have left at least 2 people dead. That includes a man who was killed while battling flames in Castilla y León, and an employee of an equestrian center died after suffering severe burns in a fire just north of Madrid. That blaze began on Monday evening, and by Tuesday, some evacuees were able to return to their homes and assess the damage.
There's a lot of burnt areas, so you can see that it spread very quickly. We left when we realized we had to, and then everyone was evacuated.
It comes as Spain, like other parts of southern Europe, is experiencing a heat wave. On Tuesday, temperatures surpassed 40 degrees Celsius in some regions, with minimal rainfall and windy conditions.
Another wildfire broke out today in Southern California. These are the hills along I-5 in northwestern Los Angeles County. The wind has helped spread the fire across nearly 500 acres. It's only about 5% contained. Scientists believe climate change is creating conditions for more and stronger wildfires. The 35th annual State of the Climate Report is out today. David Schechter is our national environmental correspondent. So, David, a lot of people talking about records being broken. Which records were broken last year in 24?
Maurice, a lot of them. Global average temperature hit a new peak. Sea surface temperature was the warmest since the 1850s. And the way glaciers are melting is breaking records, too. In fact, the glacier I visited in 2023 near the North Pole melted last year faster than any year on record.
Yet some people still have doubts that human activity is behind climate change. What has struck you as you've traveled around the world extensively reporting on this?
You don't have to look very far for an answer to that. Scientists are learning people can tolerate even less heat than we previously thought. And I've seen first responders adopting new techniques to treat overheated patients out on the field by covering them in ice before taking them to the hospital. There's also more intense flooding driven by climate change in 2024. I met people along the Delaware River whose homes flood more frequently at great cost to them. And in North Carolina, I saw how rising sea levels are washing away some homes, raising questions about the future of coastal communities. While this new report is definitely a science story, to me, climate change is much more of a human story.
Things are being undone at an extremely rapid rate.
Last year, 27 separate disasters in the U.S. cost $1 billion or more in damages. 2024 also saw unprecedented extreme rainfall, and it was the third wettest year since 1983 when record-keeping began.
As helicopters evacuate the stranded from the destruction left by flash floods Friday, witnesses take stock of the devastation in northwest Pakistan.
I've seen several houses that were washed away. I also saw 7 people, including women and children, washed away by the flash flood.
The sudden deluges and subsequent landslides were caused by a massive cloudburst or sudden intense downpours over a small area. Dozens of bodies have already been recovered from the rubble, and search and rescue missions will continue, according to the Provincial Emergency Service.
We rescued as many people as we could. The speed of the flash flood then increased, and then rescue teams started their operations, and with the help of locals, we rescued people. Relatives have identified around 130 bodies at the hospital, which have been handed over to legal heirs, and some of them are lying without ID. We are working to identify them.
Experts have also observed that cloudbursts are becoming more frequent in the region due to global warming, threatening the inhabitants living in an area already prone to flash floods and landslides.
Using buckets and garden hoses, these residents of the village of Prova are doing their best to protect their homes from the flames. Almost 5,000 firefighters have been deployed across the country. Faced with an almost never-ending heat wave, emergency services are struggling to keep up.
If it weren't for the firefighters, what would be of us? Strength to the firefighters.
On Friday, the Portuguese president announced his country's first death and requested support from the EU's firefighting force, as well as 4 Canadair planes. Meanwhile, in Spain, 14 major blazes continue. The country is considered to be at extreme risk of new wildfires.
Yesterday, the fire was almost extinguished, and today it reignited. We are trying to keep it from crossing the road because if it crosses to the town, it will reignite and come back through the other side, just like yesterday. Yesterday, it arrived from one side, and today from another.
Spain's heat wave will continue until Monday. Weather conditions are expected to worsen the spread of the fires, with moderate winds as well as temperatures of up to 44 degrees. More than 1,500 square meters have been devastated by the flames so far, an area roughly as big as metropolitan London.
These hellish scenes have been a daily reality for Syrians in Latakia and Hama, where wildfires have been burning since Monday. They've become more common in recent years, worsened by a prolonged drought and a lack of resources. Firefighters are also dealing with an additional danger: unexploded landmines.
Our teams are facing additional difficulties due to the remnants of explosives detonating. They're prevented from accessing some locations because of the minefields the ousted Assad regime left behind.
In some areas, the fires reached villages, forcing people to leave their homes. Hospitals say they're treating numerous cases of burns and smoke inhalation. The Ministry of Emergency and Disaster Management has set up operation centers to coordinate its response. It's also deployed helicopters to tackle flames in mountainous areas. For some people, assistance has come too late.
We mainly depend on olive and livestock farming. That is how the village survives. We lost many cows and chickens, as well as houses and barns in the fire, including this building behind me.
The strong winds and dry conditions are hampering teams, and it's not clear how long it will take to contain the flames. What is clear, however, is that these wildfires are yet another challenge for Syrians trying to rebuild their country.
In Baghdad's baking heat, a relentless drought is turning once fertile orchards to ash, all because of a mounting water crisis. Here in this ravaged landscape, desperate communities confront an uncertain future. Ali watches anxiously as the livelihoods of his extended family are wasted. The pear and apple trees he grew up with are now bare.
There's no farming anymore. This vast land, once fertile and productive, has turned barren. Most farm owners have sold their property and livestock and left. We're just a kilometre from the Tigris River, but we can't run pumps to draw water from the canal. It would rob the southern regions of their much-needed share.
This dried orchard is just one of many across central and southern Iraq, symbolizing the country's deepening water crisis. The Ministry of Water Resources says this year's drought is among the worst since 1933, with dam and reservoir levels at only 8% of capacity. The Mosul Reservoir, Iraq's largest, relies on approximately 85% of its waters from neighboring Turkey, but its waters have receded dramatically. The lake bed once covered in uninterrupted water now lies exposed. Submerged villages lie bare, and the ruins are visible under a scorching sun. The shoreline has shrunk far inland. Experts say storage has dropped from 8 billion to just 3 billion cubic meters of water in recent years.
Severe drought, reduced rainfall and water restrictions from Turkey's upstream dams, especially the Ilisu project, have sharply cut the flow to Mosul Dam. Climate change has reduced precipitation and increased temperatures across the entire upstream basin.
The burden weighs heaviest on farmers dealing with drying rivers and looming threats to food supplies. Unless urgent regional cooperation and effective water management are implemented, more orchards like this are at risk of vanishing.
Wildfires have smashed records this year. Los Angeles had the most destructive inferno in its history. In Spain, smoke pollution reached the highest levels in a quarter of a century, and in Turkey, thousands of people fled their homes. Now, new research analysing trends over 2 decades has shown there's been a 40% rise in the number of people at risk. Scientists identified 18.6 million recorded fires between 2002 and 2021, with a total of 440 million people affected. And while fires in Europe and North America grab public attention, 85% of the people affected are actually in Africa. But it is the growing intensity of fires close to communities that is causing concern. Researchers say there needs to be more warnings of risky activities like barbecues in drought conditions, and landscapes need to be carefully managed with dry vegetation burned off in small, controlled fires, rather than letting it build up to provide fuel for an inferno.
This garage in eastern Portugal was Jose Antunes' livelihood. Now it is skeletal, surrounded by burnt-out cars and scorched earth. But he says he is lucky he survived.
Suddenly, a strong wind came up, a terrible gust, and I saw the flames about 100 meters away, 5 or 6 meters high. That was when it got really close, and my wife started shouting, "Let's go!"
The wildfires in Portugal claimed a third victim on Wednesday, as firefighters and rescue workers continued to battle the flames that have been burning since late July. The north and centre of the country have been the hardest hit. Across the border in neighbouring Spain, high winds hindered firefighting efforts. Troops and water-dropping aircrafts were called on as a backup to try to control and extinguish 21 blazes in the west, which authorities considered a direct threat to communities. Here in Galicia, residents were reeling. The fire that gutted entire hamlets was the largest in the region's history.
I'm very sad. It's very painful. Our elders will disappear with the pain of seeing this irrecoverable landscape.
The wildfires have consumed nearly 400,000 hectares of land in Spain. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said they were more proof the climate emergency is getting worse, and that the country needs to readjust and recalibrate how it prepares for and responds to natural disasters.
In Portugal Thursday, dramatic footage shows firefighters fleeing as flames shift unexpectedly. One of them suffered severe burns and is now being treated in hospital. In the past week, several people have died in the country's wildfires. The blazes have consumed nearly 300,000 hectares, triple the 20-year annual average.
I've never seen anything like this. We had a fire 30 years ago, but it was truly frightening.
In neighboring Spain, over 400,000 hectares have burned this year, the worst season on record. While more than 20 fires were still actively burning across several regions Thursday evening, protests erupted in several cities, denouncing fire prevention and management failures. Spain's environmental prosecutor has called for investigations into whether towns met their legal obligations.
I'm going to defend my land because it's burning. We've been watching for days, many days, almost 2 weeks as our land burns. There's nothing left. Everything is destroyed. Animals, homes, people left without a house. I feel that they've lost absolutely everything.
The European Union faces its worst wildfire season on record. Over 1 million hectares have burned since January, an area larger than Cyprus or 2/3 of Belgium. This marks the first time the EU has hit the 1 million hectare milestone since records began in 2006.
Tensions with Venezuela heating up tonight. The U.S. is deploying 3 guided missile destroyers to the waters off the South American nation. A senior defense official saying that the movement is part of President Trump's effort to combat threats from Latin America drug cartels.
Venezuela has turned into a narco-terrorist state.
The Trump administration is escalating its crackdown on cartels, deploying 3 U.S. Navy guided missile destroyers to the region with 4,000 Marines and sailors, pressuring Venezuela's government to stop the flow of drugs.
They continue to send this poison to the United States, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, not to mention the TDA members that they send to our country.
President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country.
The administration also increasing the reward for information, leading to the arrest of contested President Nicolas Maduro to $50 million. In response, Maduro has mobilized 4.5 million militia troops.
With the plan we are developing to activate the militia throughout the country from north to south, from east to west, and all defensive capabilities so that no one will ever touch Venezuela.
The standoff has a long history. Former Presidents Obama and Biden opposed the Maduro regime. In 2019, under the first Trump administration, the U.S. government stopped recognizing Maduro as Venezuela's legitimate president and formally recognized the democratically elected opposition leader, Juan Guaido. In 2020, the Justice Department indicted Maduro and his top lieutenants on charges of narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking. Venezuela's current opposition leader supports Trump's crackdown.
This is about dismantling a criminal terrorist enterprise that has taken the power of Venezuela by force. So it is in the best interest of the United States and the Venezuelan people.
China issued a warning to the U.S. over the military buildup off the coast of Venezuela. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson saying, quote, "We hope the United States will do more things conducive to peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean region."
Overnight, his country already battered. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying Russia is planning new offensive operations. This coming just days before the historic summit in Alaska between President Trump and Vladimir Putin.
I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it.
But the president seeming to downplay expectations.
I'm here for one reason, to get rid of a war that somebody else started.
And after months of positive interactions, President Trump also seeming to once again blame Zelensky for the war Russia started.
I get along with Zelensky, but, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened.
But 3 years after the Russian invasion, this is the Ukrainian land the Russians now control. Is this what President Trump is talking about when he suggests Russia and Ukraine could swap land, something Zelensky has said he would not approve on his own?
I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelensky was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody, but he needs approval to do a land swap because there'll be some land swapping going on.
Zelensky says Russia is trying to deceive the U.S. and is calling for tougher sanctions. Neither Zelensky nor European leaders have been invited to this week's summit.
If it's a fair deal, I'll reveal it to the European Union leaders and to the NATO leaders and also to President Zelensky. I think out of respect, I'll call him first.
Ukraine currently holds no Russian territory. meaning that a swap would likely involve Kiev signing over its own territory in exchange for the withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukrainian land they have conquered elsewhere. Since launching its full-scale invasion in 2022, Russia has officially annexed 4 provinces of eastern Ukraine: Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Russian forces, though, are continuing their slow but steady advance.
There is no sign that the Russians are preparing for a post-war situation. On the contrary, they are moving their troops and forces to launch new offensive operations.
Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, has previously suggested that Ukraine give up all of Donetsk and Luhansk in exchange for a ceasefire, a scenario that would give Russia recognized control over a strategic industrial region that could be a launching point for a renewed invasion later on. Western analysts worry that the very format of the Alaska talks heavily favors Moscow and could leave Kiev with little room to maneuver.
Russian strikes killed at least 6 and injured 15 just days ahead of truce talks between US President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. 4 were killed in the Kherson region, including 2 civilians in a car. Kherson's governor said the strikes hit and damaged residential areas and infrastructure, such as a high-rise building, 5 houses, a cell tower, and several vehicles. Attacks in the Donetsk region killed 2 and injured another 10. Moscow launched at least 49 Shahed-type drones overnight, with Ukrainian air defenses shooting down 32. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones hit an oil pumping station in Russia's Bryansk region overnight, sparking a fire. Emergency services were sent to the scene. The strikes come as Putin and Trump are set to meet in Alaska on Friday as part of US efforts to reach a ceasefire deal.
Just days before a long-awaited meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska, Ukrainian soldiers are training in the Kharkiv region, many of them anxious for an end to the war.
We think that there should be a ceasefire. Then there would be some kind of truce, some kind of agreement. And, of course, the return of our land. We are here, away from home, away from our families, fighting.
But 3.5 years into the war, Russia now holds the whole of Crimea and much of the east of the country, all of Luhansk and most of the Donetsk, Zaporizhia and Kherson oblasts. And with President Putin spurning offers to meet with President Zelensky and showing no interest in returning seized or annexed Ukrainian territories, in Kramatorsk, just kilometers from the front line, Ukrainian soldiers have little faith in the 2 men at the negotiating table.
The US and Russia want to leave our president out of it for now, meet on their own, talk things over with a lot of pomp and circumstance, to agree on what's best for both of them, America and Russia. It's obvious that Russia wants to seize our lands, and they'll agree on something between themselves, then present Ukraine with a fait accompli.
President Trump has suggested land swaps between the 2 countries, but as Kiev does not control any Russian territory, this would likely require Ukraine to hand over further swathes of land to Moscow in return for the withdrawal of troops in other areas.
Israel is pressing military and political pressure on Hamas in the final stages of its war in Gaza, and the country has strong support from Washington. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the campaign is nearing its end, and this all comes as there is international outrage over the death of a journalist, and anti-Semitic violence is surging abroad.
With Israel's planned takeover of Gaza City, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war is nearing its end.
Especially in these days of great victories against those who came to destroy us, as we stand before the end of the campaign and work to defeat the remainder of the Iranian Axis and free all of our captives.
With the support of President Trump, Netanyahu says he won't agree to any partial hostage deal. Trump believes more military pressure is needed to get Hamas to agree to anything. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham went on Meet the Press and says Hamas must be crushed.
Enough already. Destroy Hamas. Do to Hamas what we did to the Germans and the Japanese during World War II. Annihilate them and rebuild the Palestinian society like we did with Germany and Japan.
Israel is also dealing with international outrage over the killing of 5 journalists in an Israeli airstrike, including a prominent Al Jazeera reporter. The IDF says it has evidence he was a paid terrorist and cell leader, calling him a terrorist operating under the guise of a journalist. He's seen here taking a selfie with Hamas leaders.
Israel is stating that this was a journalist who has ties to Hamas, and we published those ties to Hamas back in October. So this is no new information for anyone. And more of the pictures and evidence that seems to be coming out shows that this journalist that had at least very strong connections to the main leaders of Hamas as well.
Meanwhile, more anti-Semitic attacks are taking place around the world. In Montreal, a Jewish-Canadian father was assaulted in front of his children. He was hospitalized and the suspect arrested.
A 29-second video filmed by a witness circulating online shows a man on the ground being punched multiple times by another individual. A child is seen clinging to the victim during the assault. After the assault, the attacker is seen picking up items in a grocery bag and tossing what appears to be a kippah, a traditional Jewish head covering, into a splash pad. The mayor said she was disturbed by the violent and unacceptable attack on a father from the Jewish community.
Israel President Isaac Herzog spoke with the father and said, "May you have a swift recovery in body and soul from this terrible ordeal. We are with you and we are here for you. The whole Jewish people stands with you."
Chris, is the Israeli public concerned about the anti-Semitic attacks we are hearing around the world?
Ephraim, they're shocked. And I think that's not just Israelis here, but Jews around the world. We saw that most recent example of that Jewish Canadian brutally assaulted in front of his children. The video, it does show him being beaten repeatedly. His kippah was thrown into the water. And as Paul said, President Herzog spoke to him, offered him comfort, and he said, "We're here for you," as well as the whole Jewish people. And I think that is indicative of how people here in Israel, the president from down, consider this a shocking event. And just one latest example of many around the world. For example, we were there a couple of months ago with Aliyah, many French Jews making Aliyah, coming here to Israel to start a new life. Just warning of how difficult it is for Jews in France itself, but it's spreading to Canada and other places around the world. And many are fearing that it might get worse. And some are saying to the Jews in the diaspora, it's time to come home back to Israel.
Today we go to Israel, and I think this has been sort of an old story. Israel has always been open to a deal to return all the hostages and the fighting in Gaza, and now there seems to be hope that that may actually happen. A team of negotiators could be heading to Qatar this week.
Well, meanwhile, a new report backed by the Red Cross confirms that the hostages are being tortured by Hamas.
Saying the window has closed on a partial hostage deal, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declares the war in Gaza will end on Israel's terms.
It's behind us. We tried. We made all kinds of attempts. We went through a lot, but it turned out that they were just misleading us. And in any case, they will leave a lot of hostages in their hands, both the living and the dead, and we want them all.
This morning, the head of the IDF approved the plans for the expanded offensive in the Gaza Strip. Israel may still send negotiators to Qatar this week to push for a final ceasefire and the release of all hostages, with full support from President Trump.
October 7th was one of the worst days in history. We saw innocent people slaughtered, murdered, kidnapped by Hamas terrorists. The administration has made our goal clear. We want to see this conflict end. We want to see the hostages released. And the president and his national security team have given extensive effort and time to doing that.
The new report given to the Red Cross confirms what the world saw in recent videos. Hamas is systematically torturing Israeli hostages. Israel's health ministry says the 12 hostages freed earlier this year endured sexual harassment, worm-infested food, and months without showers or clean clothes.
We weren't allowed to move. We were starved while they ate in front of us. We were thirsty because they didn't give us water, even though they drank water and ate in front of us. And we weren't allowed to even cry.
The UN put Hamas on a blacklist, citing sexual violence during the October 7th attacks. However, it also warned Israel it might be put on that same list in the future for alleged abuse of Palestinian detainees. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Denoud, called the accusation unfounded and absurd. An Israeli report says Hamas has inflated Palestinian malnutrition deaths in a campaign to discredit Israel.
There are no war crimes. On the contrary, for us, the suffering in Gaza is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy.
New video shows another Israeli strike taking out 5 armed terrorists posing as humanitarian aid workers for World Central Kitchen.
War crimes are entirely on the part of Hamas. They're the ones that started this, and they're the ones who are continuing it. As long as they continue to hold the hostages, Israel has no choice. They have to get their citizens home. Everyone in the world should understand that. What would you do if your relatives were in one of those tunnels? You would do anything and everything possible to get them home and to get them free. But to see the video of them being intentionally starved, it's absolutely incredible. Please understand the ultimate goal of Hamas. They've put it out in their charters and restated it again and again and again. They don't want Israel on the map at all. They are calling for a genocide of all the Jews in Israel. That's their announced and written intent. The ongoing war in Gaza is the latest issue in a rift between President Trump and some of his strongest supporters.
That's right, Gordon. First came the division over the Epstein files. Now there seems to be a growing split in MAGA world over the president's support for Israel.
America's support for Israel has always been strong, and overall, while it still is, some far-right high-profile influencers have taken a hard turn against the Jewish state.
Everything they're doing is demonic. I want nothing to do with it. I will never support Israel into the future after what they've done to these children, the starvation campaign. I don't care.
Others, like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson, want America out of Israel's affairs. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of MAGA's biggest voices in Congress, has called what's happening in Gaza genocide. Poll numbers also seem to suggest a slight drop in Israeli support among the GOP. 15 years ago, in 2010, Republican support for Israel stood at 85%. Today, it's still strong, yet down to 75%. The more alarming statistic among Republicans today is that 37% have a negative view of the Jewish state. That's up 10% from just 2022, when it was 27%. Part of what's driving some of this MAGA division is coming from younger voters. It's a generation that is much more wary of international conflicts and has bought into President Trump's non-interventionist approach. For example, while 72% of Republicans overall believe America's military should support Israel, only 32% of Gen Z Trump voters feel that way. Julian Becerra, a conservative influencer on TikTok, agrees.
We need to invest in the United States first. And I think it's hypocritical of conservatives to say, yes, we're for deportations. We want to, build a wall, seal up the border, to put America first, but also say, hold on, because it's Israel, let's go ahead and send them billions of dollars.
It's part of a free-thinking mindset fueled by the powerful social media landscape.
I think the younger demographic, which has access to the social media and understands that platform, can hear the different opposing views, and they're starting to make up their mind and not just have that blind support for it.
While that's true, there are plenty of young conservatives who are pushing back. 19-year-old Breland Hollyhand works with the RNC to get out the Gen Z vote.
I think that that's a fringe that has gotten really loud. It certainly doesn't represent the vast majority of MAGA that I talk to, specifically on college campuses, just from my perspective. For me specifically, this support of Israel isn't a political stance, it's a biblical stance. And it's very clear, repeatedly throughout the Bible that those that bless Israel, the Lord will bless them. That's not something that is old or false or dated. That is still a truth here in 2025.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is in a battle for historic truth in the war against Hamas. Now, here's some things that they're battling. False allegations of genocide and forced starvation in the war.
Well, one supporter of Israel is calling out powerful influencers who are critical of the Jewish state. He wants them to come and see for themselves what's really happening.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is falsely accused on two fronts in its war on Hamas.
The first front is the actual battle zones. We have sent millions and millions of text messages, phone calls. This has never happened before in the war. That the army that is fighting terrorists in an urban environment calls on the civilians in enemy territory to leave, and the enemy shoots them if they try to leave. And then Israel is blamed for genocide. That's ridiculous. It is a blatant falsehood.
The second is the accusation Israel is starving the people of Gaza.
If we had a starvation policy, now nearly 2 years after the beginning of the war, everybody in Gaza would be dead. But they're not. Because that's not our policy. Our policy is the exact opposite. We sent in 2 million tons, 1.9 million tons of food and medical aid into Gaza.
This comes as a UN-affiliated body quietly lowered its threshold of what determines a famine. The change enabled the group to declare a worst-case scenario of famine in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Israeli government approved more than 3,000 housing units in a strategic area just outside of Jerusalem. Israel's finance minister says the move buries the idea of a Palestinian state. Tim Ballard, who leads an organization fighting sex trafficking and is the subject of the movie The Sound of Freedom, came to the region to help the Druze and Christians inside Syria suffering a genocide at the hands of Islamists.
And here's the shock. I thought we were the tip of the spear, right? I was wrong. We were not. But I'll tell you this, I was shocked and tearfully shocked to find out that the IDF has been out there without cameras, without fanfare. They've been out there rescuing the Christians and the Jews. And I'm talking like major efforts. I'm like, who are you guys?
Ballard says this is not the story being told in the West.
They don't want anyone to know. They're just helping people who are dying and bleeding and being raped and sent to sex markets. And I just felt the Spirit of God just like, they got them wrong. The West has them wrong.
He's calling on his friends Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, who are critical of Israel, to come and see for themselves.
Candace Owens just went on the Tucker Carlson show and said some pretty wild things about the Jewish state. Here's a clip from the very viral podcast.
I don't think we've been a sovereign nation since they shot JFK. And when I say they, it's like people online say, what do you mean by they? I'm talking about Israel. I don't want you guys to read in between. I'm talking about Israel. So let's stop making that a taboo subject because they've gone mask down. Everything they're doing is demonic. I want nothing to do with it. I will never support Israel into the future after what they've done to these children. The starvation campaign. I don't care. Please write your article. You've already written them all. I don't know what you could add about me. But I do not support Israel. And I don't think that Jewish Americans should support Israel. And I hope that they're now having those conversations. I see many of them recognizing that they have been propagandized into believing they have to support this demonic state.
I just want to say, will you just be open enough to come? Come. I will come with Candace. I will come with Tucker. I will come. I will take them across the border. I will show them the kids. I will walk them into Gaza.
Netanyahu says history proves lies have consequences.
I think this battle for truth has tragic historical antecedents. My father was a great historian of the Jewish people and a great historian of the Jews in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, every single massacre that the Jews suffered was preceded by a campaign of vilification and lies.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is accelerating the operation against Hamas in Gaza City. He's ordered the IDF to shorten the timelines to conquer the last terror strongholds in Gaza.
Meanwhile, hundreds of Jews from the United States are moving to Israel to start new lives despite the war.
As Israel's offensive in the Gaza Strip ramps up, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is still considering the ceasefire deal Hamas has agreed to. Since the last ceasefire ended in March, the Israel Defense Forces say they've eliminated over 2,100 Hamas operatives, including senior commanders, and now control 75% of the Strip. During a visit to the IDF's Gaza division, Netanyahu praised the troops.
I was impressed by the fighting spirit and determination to complete the defeat of Hamas and the release of all of our hostages.
In Jerusalem, IDF leaders presented plans to capture Gaza City, and Netanyahu ordered the timeline moved up to take the city even faster. In Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, Israel's finance minister announced a project to build 3,400 housing units in a disputed area. Smotrich called a two-state solution with the Palestinians a two-state delusion.
The time has come to fully apply Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, to forever remove from the table the idea of dividing the land, and to make sure that by September, Europe's hypocrite leaders will simply have nothing to recognize.
Wednesday also marked the first Aliyah flight since October 7th, bringing 225 Jewish Americans and Canadians to make Israel their home.
You know, we're fulfilling a dream of dreams. We're trying to come and rebuild the land and be a part of the Jewish people who have been going through a lot the last couple of years.
Aliyah in Hebrew means to go up or to ascend. So at Bible times, they went up to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast. And for these people arriving today, it's just as important. They're here to fulfill a lifelong dream, begin again, even to help out in a time of war.
This is great. Exciting. I'm excited. Yeah, it's amazing. Overwhelming, but it's really, really cool to see everyone out here like this.
These two are moving from St. Louis and Los Angeles and will be enlisted in a program that helps IDF soldiers.
It feels right, you know, home is home, and I think it feels the most right for me personally to come give back and be here. That's where I feel closest to my family and to myself.
I'm the same way. I just feel like it's the right thing for me right now, and I feel very connected to Israel, and it's the place I want to be.
There's a profound spiritual connection for the Jewish people to the land of Israel. They write about it, but you just saw the experience of it. So you have young women from St. Louis arriving and suddenly saying, well, this just feels like home. Well, there's a spiritual connection to the land, the restoration of the land and the people, the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. You can never break that. That is something that's been ordained from on high.
The growing popularity of astrology is the subject of tonight's Eye on America.
So you were born with Sagittarius rising.
Something in the stars, some divine imperative led us to Danielle Polgar.
You have your moon in Aquarius's opposite sign.
This astrological counselor in Santa Fe gave me my first natal reading, a cosmic clocking of my life's patterns and cycles.
There's a collective curiosity about astrology, and I think what it can really facilitate is helping people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
In our stressful world, astrology feels bigger than ever. In the U.S., it's an online industry worth an estimated $3 billion. CoStar, one of the most popular astrology apps, reports 30 million registered users.
What do you say to people watching who will say, come on, this is 2025. How do you still believe in this stuff?
It's our first tool to understand our relationship with whatever this place is, right?
There's quite a market for mystical services. Roughly 30% of Americans say at least once a year they consult horoscopes, tarot cards, or fortune tellers.
Especially with Jupiter going through your 9th house.
And we met one of them, Erica McAuliffe.
Right.
Polgar's chart readings gave her life insight that feels heaven-sent.
And what do you use astrology for?
I use it as a tool for self-discovery. I think it shows a part of yourself that maybe you're not necessarily thinking about.
It's cosmic guidance for everyday anxiety, like a map or sheet music.
Clarity, confidence, courage. I think those are the three things that people are seeking.
The United States Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, last week told my friend Miranda Devine on her new podcast that she believes other life forms might be real. And she said she's continuing to search for the truth.
Is there anything in the files that you think you could find or you have found?
Nothing that I'm prepared to talk about today. We are I'm just going to say this. We're continuing to look for the truth and share that truth with the American people.
So do you believe that there could be aliens?
I honestly, like, my personal belief, I have my own views and opinions.
Right.
In this role, I got to be careful with what I share.
Yeah, it was an intriguing conversation. And joining me now is a journalist who's been investigating UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, for years. Former 60 Minutes journalist Ross Coulthart is the author of a book called In Plain Sight, an investigation into UFOs and impossible science, and is now the special international correspondent for News Nation. Now, what did you make of these comments by Tulsi Gabbard?
Tulsi Gabbard is saying what a huge number of US officials have been saying for the past few years, Sherry. There's a huge sea change happening in American executive government right now. They're suddenly waking up to the reality of UFOs. It all started in 2017 when the New York Times revealed that the Pentagon had secretly been investigating UFOs. And then it's come out more recently that a large number of officials are very interested in the phenomenon. Notably, most recently, Tulsi Gabbard, of course, the Director of National Intelligence, but also Vice President Vance. He admitted very recently that he's been watching a lot of UFO videos, and like everyone else, he's intrigued.
There have been a lot of calls for the Trump administration to disclose what they know. I mean, this administration promised to be very transparent about classified files before they won office. We haven't seen that transparency yet. Do you expect we're going to, or is there a good reason why they haven't disclosed? I mean, we're what, 9, nearly 10 months in, why they haven't disclosed what information they hold on this topic?
I suspect that 99% of your viewers won't believe what I'm about to tell you, Sherry, but I am absolutely convinced after years of investigating this subject that the United States really has got information in its files about non-human intelligences engaging with this planet. And the Pentagon, frankly, is flat out lying when it denies any knowledge of such intelligence. I interviewed a guy called David Grush back in June 2023, who was a former very senior National Geospatial Intelligence Agency officer who used to write the Presidential Daily Brief. And Dave went public with me admitting that he had uncovered evidence of a UAP technology craft retrieval program, where craft are secretly being reverse engineered by the US government. Why are they hiding it? I think they're hiding it because they're using the technology to try and develop an advantage over foreign adversaries, which is frankly fair enough. I do think, though, that the American public and the rest of the world should have the right to know that we're not alone.
Ross, do you think, and I don't know if you've even looked into this yet, but do you think Elon Musk might have some information on here as well? Because obviously he does have a space company, satellite network as well. So he might be tapped into some of this sort of information that people are actually collecting physically.
I've been told by people in the intelligence community in the United States that Elon Musk had to be briefed because of his satellite work that he's been doing for the Defence Department. Frankly, one of the things I think Australia has its head in the sand on is the volume and intensity of admissions by the US administration. There are so many people who are now admitting that there is there. Senior whistleblowers coming forward, but also people in government. You've got Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, has pledged transparency, and he's got a secret investigation going on into allegations that people have been murdered to protect this secret. As well as that, John Ratcliffe, the new director of the CIA, he also has vowed transparency. We're holding our breath and not really expecting much of a result just yet with President Trump. He's been very distracted. But I did an interview with Don Trump Jr. late last year, and he admitted to me that he is very interested in UAPs and he's very engaged, and I get the impression so is his old man.
A brutal crackdown is taking place inside Iran, including mass executions and political arrests. This time, it's not hidden. A former war crimes prosecutor is sounding the alarm to warn the world of an unfolding massacre that's happening in plain sight.
Stephen Rapp, former U.S. ambassador at large in the Office of Global Criminal Justice, tells CBN News the Iranian regime isn't just cracking down with arrests or beatings, it's using executions to silence dissent, with the numbers rising fast after the recent war with Israel.
There are thousands of political prisoners, and they could charge them with these phony charges and begin mass executions, really judicial murders of peaceful opponents.
In 2023, Iran executed more than 850 people. A year later, that number jumped to 975. And now, just 8 months into 2025, over 700 executions have already been recorded.
The Islamic Republic continues to be the leading state sponsor of executions, second to the Chinese Communist Party.
Among those put to death, 3 Kurdish men and a top nuclear scientist accused of collaborating with Israel.
The regime fears its people more than a potential external attack because ultimately, in their perspective, they can absorb any attack on their military installations. However, if the discontent internally will to expand and lead to nationwide unrest, as it has in the past, it would really be the key catalyst for regime collapse.
Others sentenced to death are charged with vague offenses like, quote, enmity against God.
What I fear is instead of 1,000 a year, we could end up with literally tens of thousands being executed.
People are being rounded up all over the place. People are being stopped in the streets and told to hand over their cell phones while they check messaging history, photos taken, phone calls made, websites visited. I mean, it's just blanket across the board. Cars are being stopped and checked. Homes are being raided. No one is safe.
And it's not only political activists being targeted.
As the internal crackdowns expand and intensify, the religious minorities tend to be on the front lines of this repression apparatus.
Just last month, 21 Iranian Christians were arrested in these 6 cities. Officials accused them of spreading Zionist Christianity and, quote, acting against national security.
Those two things are the classic accusations for Christians when they get arrested and charged with something. Of course, the government just wants to stop the spread of Christianity in Iran, but this is amplified now because they are paranoid.
Days after the Israel-Iran ceasefire, the regime's state-run Fars news agency, which is tied to the Revolutionary Guard, openly called for a repeat of the 1988 massacre, when 30,000 political prisoners were secretly executed.
They got away with murder, mass murder in 1988. They think they can get away with it again.
As executions mount and repression deepens, human rights advocates warn the almost worldwide silence only enables the regime's growing brutality.
As long as the international community, the United States and Europe particularly, do not speak up against these heinous crimes, the regime therefore doesn't feel any obligation to scale back its internal repression.
Christians in Nigeria are one such people group. There was a report that came out today that found that 32 Christians in Nigeria are killed every single day. 7,800 have been abducted since 2009, and 185,000 Nigerians have been killed, 125,000 Christians, and 60,000 liberal Muslims. There are 22 jihadist groups. I didn't realize this. I thought there were Boko Haram. I thought there were a few Islamic extremist groups operating in Nigeria, but 22, and they're systematically going around terrorizing Christians. It's been called a silent genocide because nobody cares, and if there are no Jews, then there's no news, and that's just the reality of how Western media often operates. Because it's black on black violence, because it's black terrorists killing black Christians, the media is completely silent about this. And it's not just happening in Nigeria, in Mozambique, in the Congo, in Tanzania, lots of countries in Africa, you have radical jihadist groups that are killing and persecuting Christians. So Albanese, if you really cared about innocent human life, you would be taking a strong stance against radical Islamic jihadism, and that is the common thread that links Hamas, that links the groups terrorizing the Christians. People think, oh, well, you know, this is just Hamas, it's only going to affect Israel. No, radical Islam will affect all of us. It already is. So it's time we actually stand up for Christians around the world as well.
The problem with what's happening in Africa, I think, Freya, is that the perpetrators are followers of Islam and the victims are Christians. And that upsets the whole leftist narrative of the oppressed and the oppressor, because according to that narrative, Christians are the oppressors and Muslims typically are the oppressed. But of course, in Africa, those roles are reversed. And so the left don't want to know anything about it because it goes against the narrative. The other thing is that defending Christians for the secular left would risk endorsing views that they believe are antiquated and are oppressive. Sanctity of life, chastity, things like hierarchical social norms.
Now to a shocking act of gun violence, a serious one here in Texas, Austin, Texas, a Target parking lot. Yeah, nowhere is safe these days. A gunman opened fire, killing 3 people there, among them a child. The alleged shooter initially drove away from the scene, but police managed to catch up with him.
We seen the first body on the ground, and then all the police started swarming in. It was just chaos.
The call to police came at around 2 p.m. Reports of shots fired from the parking lot of this Target in North Austin. Officers arrived 4 minutes later and found 3 victims, 2 adults and 1 child.
2 of those were pronounced on scene by Austin Travis County EMS. 1 was transported to a local hospital where they were pronounced at the hospital.
Police say they spotted the suspect as he carjacked a vehicle of one of his victims and fled. During that chase, they allege he then crashed that stolen vehicle in an office parking lot about 1.5 miles away. Investigators say he then hijacked a nearby Volkswagen, injuring that driver, and tried to escape again before being stopped by police.
He was then found by Austin PD in South Austin, where he was taken into custody after a tasing.
In a statement, Target said they are devastated by the violence that occurred and will be providing support resources, including grief counseling, to our team.
My first instinct was just to tell people where the exes were.
Target employee Freyan Sagastume said he heard active shooter on the radio before helping customers.
I was really confused at first because I thought that this only happened in the news and stuff.
Haiti's top gang leader in the sights of the U.S. Justice Department. A federal grand jury has indicted Jimmy Cherizier, better known as Barbecue, for what officials call a wide-ranging conspiracy, with Washington putting a $5 million bounty on his head.
Anyone who was giving money to Cherizier, also known as Barbecue because of his violent acts in his home country, cannot say, I didn't know that he was sanctioned by the U.S. government.
Also indicted is Cherizier's associate Basil Richardson, a.k.a. Fredo Pam, who lives in the U.S. state of North Carolina. Both are accused of soliciting money transfers from the Haitian diaspora to help pay for the weapons and salaries of gang members. Cherizier responded to the accusations with a post on social media.
Basil Richardson, a.k.a. Fredo, is innocent. He has never sent any money to me to finance anything in Haiti. Stop with all those lies and we can collaborate.
An elite Haitian police officer until his firing in 2018, Cherizier is alleged to have organized large-scale massacres in several Haitian slums. In 2020, he united 9 of Port-au-Prince's street gangs in an alliance that would later grow to control some 90% of the Haitian capital. Rights groups say its members are responsible for massacres, rapes, kidnapping, extortion, and arson. Critics say it's unclear what the latest indictment and bounty are likely to accomplish, noting that Barbecue and other gang leaders continue to operate openly from strongholds in the capital.
Dramatic surveillance video capturing 2 armed thieves robbing an armored truck in Pennsylvania, making away with hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash.
Kodiak Road, H-Mart. This truck was robbed.
The robbery unfolding around 10:30 in the morning Tuesday. You see the driver of that truck walking in with a bag full of money. Then 2 masked men in hoodies rush in. It appears one armed with an AR-15 style weapon, the other with a handgun. Moments later, the men run out with that bag full of cash. Authorities say it had up to $800,000 in it.
The suspects approached, committed the robbery, and fled, all in the course of 15 to 20 seconds.
The driver telling police the suspects forced her to hand over her weapon before taking the cash, then fled the scene in a black Acura TLX. Authorities finding that getaway vehicle a short time later, but no signs of the suspects. Police say they believe the suspects are tied to other robberies in the area. Back in June, 2 armed thieves robbing a Brinks truck at this Home Depot, getting away with $1.5 million in cash.
The way the robbery was committed was very similar to the other robberies that we're aware of. We can't say 100% at this point, at this early in investigation, that they're definitely related. However, the initial preliminary evidence supports that idea.
A twisted metal frame marks the spot where a car bomb exploded in Cali, Colombia's 3rd largest city. It was detonated outside a military aviation facility.
We were walking home and suddenly there was a loud explosion. The shockwave knocked us all to the ground.
I was inside when the explosion was heard. We were all thrown to the floor and we managed to get out as best as we could.
Officials are now on high alert. It was the first of 2 attacks on Thursday. The second brought down a police helicopter the country's president says was on a mission to destroy coca leaf crops, the plant used for making cocaine. Gustavo Petro has called it terrorism, blaming factions of the former FARC guerrilla group and cartels for the deaths. They've been increasing attacks ahead of next year's presidential election.